Hello everyone, my name is Stephane Desouches. I'm an assistant professor at the Medical College of Wisconsin. I'm a musculoskeletal and cardiothoracic imaging radiologist. I'm also a member of the ACR Human Resources Commission. The Human Resources Commission's primary goal is wellness of the radiology community. Amongst other things, we perform a yearly job market update where we contact groups across the country and determine hiring trends. So today's talk is referencing our kind of the job market and some other important things along the process of your first job. I'd like to start by thanking Claire Bender, our former chair, and Eric Rubin, our current chair of the Human Resources Commission. Their support along the process as well as contributions have been very important. Additionally, among the other ACR Human Resources Commission members, everyone is an integral part of the process that we go through to try to promote wellness within the radiology community. Our staff, Jan, Angelica, Joe, and Dominic, have also more than performed their duty in helping support the mission of the ACR Commission. So let's start with where we are today. As I mentioned earlier, each year the Human Resources Commission performs a nationwide job market survey where we send a survey out to every practice across the United States, both private, academic, including military, Veterans Affairs, and teleradiology. The components of the survey include hiring for the prior year, and that we can compare that to what was the presumed hiring for that year when we asked the year before. Additionally, we look at subspecialties that are being hired, what kind of full-time, part-time, expected retirements, etc. Unfortunately, this year, COVID-19 happened, and we normally send out our job market survey in the spring each year so that we can produce results by the fall. However, this year, obviously, if we had been surveying our practices across the U.S. during the spring, we would have had very skewed numbers based off of COVID-19. So while we didn't actually do our job market survey this year, we are working to compile data, particularly from the ACR Career Center, in terms of trends in posting, applications per posting, etc., just to get an idea of where jobs are increasing or decreasing, what types of jobs, subspecialty, full-time, part-time, night work, etc. And hopefully we're going to get those things available to you within this year, as we normally would with our job market update. Hopefully, maybe you even have some of that data available to you by the time you're seeing this presentation, but we are working to get some information out there. Even though this was an unusual year, there is still a lot of good information out there that we can bring to the community. So let's talk about some of our ongoing projects, just so that you have an idea of what we're doing and how we're trying to support the radiology community. So obviously you understand that our imaging volumes change faster than our ability to hire, right? We cannot hire for the following weekend. It takes months, sometimes half a year or more, in order to bring on a new person, right? We have to identify that we need a new person. We have to interview, give a contract, accept, all that. And then even after all of that, licensure, whether it's medical licensure or credentialing for the hospitals, etc., all of that takes time. And so it can be very difficult to, on a dime, change how many radiologists we have on staff. We don't really have any good predictive models on how and when to hire. So we're hoping to use some of the data that's available to us throughout multiple years of our job market survey, as well as through the Career Center and other resources, to kind of determine better indicators and lagging indicators for when to determine hiring. And in larger practices, this isn't as big of a process or a problem. Larger private practice groups, academic groups, they can absorb the cost of an extra radiologist for a period of time. If you expect you're going to need a new person in 3 months or 6 months, and you start the hiring process, great if it works out that they start right around the time that they're needed. But usually, as I said, that's not the issue. And so in order to not fall behind in terms of the amount of radiologists for the number of studies that we're reading, you want to hire ahead of schedule. However, if you hire too far ahead of schedule or volumes change, what do you do? And so larger practices can absorb the salary of that radiologist until volumes increase, because volumes continue to increase across the board. But smaller practices may not be able to absorb that cost, and so we're trying to find predictors that can kind of give them a better idea of when is the appropriate time to start hiring based off of trends in their own volumes, etc. Basically, we want to avoid this. I read a lot of CTs this past weekend. We need another body imager, right? All of a sudden, at best, we're looking at 6 months before we're going to get a new person probably. And that's a lot of time in order to be looking for a new person and trying to keep up with the increased volumes. So in addition, I thought I'd pass along some of these non-data driven trends that we've been seeing. The Human Resources Commission is made up of radiologists and radiation oncologists across the United States. And so we are actually, surprisingly or unsurprisingly, seeing a lot of the same trends between different regions, different types of clinical practice. We've got representation of academic practices, private practice groups, rural emergency med radiologists, radiation oncologists. So a lot of these trends we're seeing across the board, and we've been discussing, and I just wanted to pass along a few that we're seeing. So as you know, COVID threw kind of everything for a loop. In many locations, imaging volumes were down up to 70%. However, this did not stay with us for that long. We had a relatively quick rebound, and a lot of places, I can speak for ourselves, our volumes are higher than our pre-COVID volumes. While some of this is likely catch up from the diminished volumes during COVID, screening exams that were put off, etc. Overall, even our non-screening exams have increased higher than pre-COVID volumes, and so we are seeing an increase in our volumes across the board. In addition to that, some senior radiologists are likely in an increased risk group for infection complications, severe infection, elderly or other comorbidities. And so even though we had a huge economic contraction during this last year because of COVID shutting down economies across the country, the stock market has continued to do well. So unlike the prior economic downturns that we've dealt with, where retirement funds were hit pretty hard, this year we're actually having retirement funds are doing reasonably well. And so you have radiologists who are at potentially increased risk and may not want to come into a hospital or a clinical setting in order to decrease their risk of exposure. And they're their retirements are doing well. And so this actually might make retirement more enticing for some senior radiologists. Additionally, trends from recent years have been very good for job seekers, and usually our hiring cycles last more than a few years. You'll notice that there's always ups and downs, especially within particular subspecialties, but it's a very cyclical kind of thing. Every specialty has the need, and so it's just a matter of at the time which one has that need. In general, like I said, our imaging volumes continue to increase, and so it's not that we suddenly have a glut of radiologists. We continue to need more radiologists to keep up. So all of that kind of tells us that this is a good time. I can speak personally from my own fellows and residents that when they've been seeking for jobs, they've had a lot of opportunities available to them. So what else can I offer you? Right? We're only 9 minutes in at this point, and we've got a 30-minute talk. So I wanted to kind of go through a little bit. Maybe I can be helpful to you in your first job search. I was actually a part of the Human Resources Commission during the time that I was applying for my position. And even though I had all those resources, I had a lot of questions and definitely got lost in some of the contracts and et cetera during my job hunt. And really this comes down to you don't know what you don't know, right? You can read a lot online, but if you don't know the right question to ask, you're not necessarily going to find the answer that you need. It's extremely important to your long-term happiness to be happy in the workplace. If you are unhappy at your work, it tends to bleed into your home life, etc. And so it's important to be able to understand all the details of what you're signing up for in order to achieve that happiness long term. So this is something I'm sure you're all familiar with, but we'll just quickly go through kind of what are you looking for. Private practice remains one of the largest types of practices for radiologists in our country. Predominantly RVU-driven compensation. You also can be an employee where you are paid a set salary, maybe with an incentive, versus partnership track where you can invest some of your own money into the practice, whether that's paying for equipment, maintenance of clinics, etc. And they each have their own compensation models. Again, most radiologists go into private practice, and however, private practices in a lot of places are growing because of consolidation of resources, etc. Compared to academic groups, they're associated with medical school, something like that, and you're going to be more in doing research, education. Now, I say more, but you're still going to be a clinical radiologist in most places. The volumes of a lot of academic practices have increased to near private practice levels. A lot of large academic practices are able to mitigate that by hiring more radiologists, so you have less studies per radiologist, so they have a larger field of radiologists who are able to read those same studies. In government, predominantly we're talking about VA, but you can also do military, etc. There certainly are a lot of options out there. You do not need to be in the military to do government radiology. Veterans Affairs Administration, is usually slightly slower in terms of the volumes, etc. But they do continue to get busier with retired military, etc. Finally, teleradiology is there's been a large increase in shift towards teleradiology, particularly this year. So you can imagine people are avoiding the possibility of COVID infection, and this has caused people to kind of shift to a teleradiology where you can work from home. Teleradiology has a lot of advantages in that you can basically live anywhere you want in the US, and you'll read for a number of different sites throughout the country. Things, the stigma behind teleradiology of being a doc in a box is still there. However, it's important to realize that there's a lot of practices where there is still a fair amount of interaction. A fair number of teleradiology groups will have you read for particular hospitals, and so you actually can develop those relationships with your emergency physicians, etc. It's not that they're going to be able to come to the read room and talk to you in person, but there is still that conversation that can occur. So you've decided what type of practice you want to go into, you've applied, and you've had some interviews, and you've been offered some positions, and they offer you a contract. So I'm not going to go into the fine print of contract negotiations. I'm not an attorney. However, there are some key things that kind of I think would be helpful to keep in the back of your mind as you're going through this process. So while we're all used to clicking that checkbox at the bottom of the terms of agreement all the time online, anytime we access basically anything, you may read every word. Congratulations to you. It takes a lot of time to read the entire contract fully each time. And we kind of have this assumption in our society that, oh, well, it's been reviewed. If there was a big red flag, then it would have been caught by now. And so this contract has been reviewed by a lawyer. However, keep in mind the lawyer is hired by the group or hospital that you're applying to, and they're reviewing this contract to protect that group or hospital. They're not hired to make the contract fair. In order to kind of make sure that there's fairness to the contract, it's actually not unreasonable to hire your own attorney to look over the contract. While it may seem like a fair bit of money at the offset, remember that this is potentially a long-term commitment. The income that you'll be getting will be much higher. And if there's any kind of red flags or any questions that you have about it, if it's not very clear language, it might be worth spending the money. There are law offices that specialize in contract review and negotiation. So if you're especially applying to a private practice group, it may be worth looking into. This is less important with government and academic practices, as there's a lot of checks and balances along the way to creating the contract. That doesn't mean that there can't be something to be reviewed and potentially negotiated, but it's less of an issue in terms of those. So everyone loves to get that signing bonus. Great, I got some extra money, especially as a fellow. It's always nice to have that little extra spending cash for down payment on a home, etc. So this doesn't usually mean extra money. It can, and that's something to make sure. Are they giving you a signing bonus of here's an extra $25,000? Or is it just early compensation that they will then take $5,000 out of each future paycheck until it's paid back? And so that does actually have tax implications. You're in a lower tax bracket when you're a fellow, and so that money coming in then actually could potentially be taxed less, so that's always nice. But it's important to kind of know, is this extra money or just early compensation that you're going to be getting less money later on? Some larger institutions, particularly academics, will do what's called loan forgiveness, where they will not necessarily pay off the entire loan, but they'll pay off a portion of the loan. It's basically the same thing as a signing bonus. And they'll either give you the loan either before or at the first paycheck. And this is basically requisite on number of years of service. So we'll give you $15,000 towards your loans, and you have to be with us for 5 years or 3 years, whatever it is. And so if you do not stay with that institution for those requisite years, you're on the hook to repay the loan, or at least a portion of it usually. So it's something to keep in mind when they have that. So speaking of staying at a particular location for a period of time, you've probably heard of people, even before they started, backing out of a contract, signing for a better deal and more money, different benefits, different location, whether it's family related or otherwise. And so is this really, illegal? Can you get in trouble for this? And so while it's frowned upon, and radiology is a smaller world than you can think about the people in your resident and fellow section. These are the people that you're going to be your colleagues going forward. And so radiology is not as big of a world as it may seem. The legal ramifications of backing out of this contract at this point are limited. The caveat to that is some rural underserved practices can enforce what's called a reliance clause. And basically they've relied on you to fill a position, and then the time and effort spent to find a replacement, whether it takes 3 months, 6 months, etc., they can monetize that and seek damages. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at those types of practices. It's not a common thing, but it is something to keep in mind. If you're set on a particular location, non-complete clauses are certainly important, a restrictive covenant. I've spoken to attorneys on both sides, hospitals and representing physicians, and guess what? They disagree on if it's enforceable. Basically, what it comes down to is the courts. So you can imagine that anytime a court gets to decide, so it's reasonable, is how many states say that a non-compete must be quote-unquote reasonable. And that decision is up to the courts to decide. So you can imagine if an attorney who represents the physician is able to clearly delineate that there's something unreasonable about it. And I say that because any part of the non-compete is unreasonable, the entire contract gets thrown out. It's not that, that portion is not reasonable, but the rest still stands. Any portion is unreasonable, the whole non-compete will get thrown out by court. So basically, if the lawyer is able to convince the courts that there's something unreasonable in it, then the entire non-compete can be thrown out. So it comes down to who is the better litigator. Oftentimes this is negotiated out of court, and sometimes they'll allow you to buy out your non-compete in order to be able to move to another practice. So just so that you know, there are a few states that do not enforce physician non-competes, these listed here. And then several other states actually have even higher standards for their non-competes. So if you're looking into these states as locations for your job, it might be worth kind of doing a little extra research and figuring out what exactly their statutes are. Hopefully you don't need to deal with that, but if it's one of those, if you're going to a specific location that you are really looking forward to, whether it's family or a specific type of lifestyle you want to do, just keep in mind that there are some states that are a little bit less restricted for the non-compete. Other thing I can give you is, remember, this is going to be the largest jump in salary probably through your career. Occasionally there might be something else that's a bigger jump, but going from a fellow resident salary to an attending salary is a pretty big jump. And so it can be very easy to get focused on that bottom line number, right? The base salary. And you throw in the incentive, great. That's the number that they're paying you. But keep in mind there are a lot of other benefits that you really should incorporate into those numbers, right? So CME money, right? Are they giving you any money, $6,000, $10,000 for CME money? Is it for attending conferences, etc.? So that definitely adds up pretty quickly. Licensure and society membership. Are they paying for your state licensure, for your ACLS and BLS? Are they paying for any other memberships, society memberships for RSNA, ACR, etc.? And all those things do add up pretty quickly. Do they provide a retirement match? Is it just a match? Do they provide more? Is it, do you need a certain amount of years before they start matching, etc.? And then the bonus, right? Usually that's built into that, that they give you that number along with that base salary. But the important thing is it a fixed salary or a fixed incentive bonus, right? Do you check the box, I got X amount of RVUs or whatever their criteria are, and you get a certain amount of money as your bonus as long as you meet those criteria? Or is it more variable? Are there different factors that get involved and things like that? And so, is there a potential range of incentive bonus that you could get? And it's important to know, because if you're kind of counting on a certain amount of money and it's reduced for one reason or another, is that going to negatively affect your finances? So in conclusion, hopefully some of this information was helpful to you. Despite COVID, because of the rapid rebound in our imaging volumes, the job market seems strong or remains strong. There are many jobs available. And I will point out that fellowship training still remains worth it. There are certainly jobs where you can get straight out of residency, but there's a lot of practices that like to have a niche that you fill. That doesn't mean that you're going to be doing just that subspecialty reads, but they like to say that they have a neuroradiologist, they have a breast imager, they have a musculoskeletal radiologist, etc. And so you're the kind of go-to person for some of those studies, but it may not be the only thing that you read. But it is important to do a fellowship in something that you enjoy and you want to practice, right? It's easy to fall into the trap of, oh, well, this practice wants, for example, a breast radiologist, so I'll do breast. But if you're not going to enjoy doing that as your practice for the long term, then it's probably not worth it. Obviously you've got to balance, how important is the location, the group, compared to your enjoyment of the actual work that you do. But you're going to be doing that work for a long time, and it's important to be able to appreciate and enjoy that. So thank you very much for your time. Hopefully this was somewhat helpful to you. Again, hopefully we'll have some information out for you soon, if not already, in terms of trends from the ACR Career Center data, etc. But thank you again for your attention on behalf of the ACR Human Resources Commission and myself. I hope you've gotten something out of it. Thank you.